ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ප්‍රථම වරට SLT 4G වෙතින් දැන් PO TV නරඹන්න. ඉදිරියටම ගෙන යන SLT 4G.
ලෙන්ගතුකම වැඩි කරගන්න ලව්ජු රුපියල් 50ට අඩු කළා.
මාමේ එන්න අපිට එකක් බොමු.
Tonight, missing the point. Dr. Palitha Kohana says UNHRC missing the larger picture with dubious Karuna investigation tweet.
They were not all recruited in the eastern province of Sri Lanka where Karuna elsewhere. I would think UN asked the entire question of child recruitment.
Rejecting the report. The US Embassy in Colombo has denied a $10 million MCC disbursement to the previous government while promising Sri Lanka of traffic control support. Awaiting justice. Easter Commission told of victims still languishing due to assistance that never came. Not a fail-safe. The central bank says it cannot ensure LFCs won't fail, but can only try to prevent collapse. All that and much more coming up on First at 9, this Friday the 26th of June 2020.
Nava sunlight sakura. Then dikukal pavathina sakura mal suandin.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to First at 9. I'm Dhamike Kanaka. Let's start with your local stories. Now, the United Nations Human Rights Council last night tweeted a suggestion to the Sri Lankan government calling on it to include child recruitment, a crime by international law, in its investigations into Vinayagamurthy Muralidharan alias Karunamman's recent controversial comments. The UN body, while calling for accountability for all, charged the government with the responsibility of investigating such a serious crime on the former Eastern Province LTT commander. However, former Sri Lankan permanent representative to the United Nations Dr. Palitha Kohana says that the UNHRC should be addressing the bigger picture of the almost 21,000 child soldiers recruited in the north and east, as well as the terrorist organization's west-based fundraisers.
Sri Lanka's former permanent representative to the United Nations, Dr. Palitha Kohana, weighed in on a recent tweet posted last night by the UNHRC in Geneva, calling on the government to include charges of wholesale recruitment of child soldiers in its investigations into Karunamman's recent inflammatory comments regarding his wartime exploits against the Sri Lankan government. Dr. Kohana stated that while he was surprised at the contents of the tweet, he expected the UNHRC to focus on the larger picture that covers all the estimated 21,000 child soldiers both in the east and the north as well.
I'm a little confused because Karuna himself is currently making a statement before the authorities. On the other hand, the Twitter account also goes on to suggest that he should be investigated for the recruitment of children. We know that thousands of children were recruited by the LTTE prior to 2009. According to Human Rights Watch, the number exceeded 21,000. According to UNICEF, the number exceeded 7,000. They were not all recruited in the eastern province of Sri Lanka where Karuna elsewhere. So I would think that the UN asked the entire question of child recruitment be investigated, including those who were recruited up in the north.
Dr. Kohana also added that the UNHRC cannot forget the fundraisers who enabled the recruitment of child soldiers in its somewhat late calls for investigations, and the LTT activists who remain largely within easier reach for the UN organization than they are to the Sri Lankan authorities.
We cannot forget children recruited with funds raised overseas. We know very well that those who raise funds currently live in Western countries. Those who raised funds and also those who provided training for the children. Children who were later used as cannon fodder should also be investigated. Finally, I would just like to say that Karuna rejoined the mainstream, joined the democratic mainstream, and therefore we need to acknowledge that fact as well. I think also that 10 years after the event might be a bit late now.
Now, following revelations of two MCC agreement fund disbursements totaling $10 million to the previous government, contained in the final report presented to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday, the Embassy of the United States in Colombo has issued an official denial via Twitter. While denying the reports, the tweet also says that funds for preparatory activities have been cancelled or indefinitely postponed pending the government's decision whether to proceed with the grant. Meanwhile, US Ambassador Elena B. Teplitz offers the US government's fullest assistance to solve Sri Lanka's road traffic problems in urban areas at a meeting with Minister of Transport and Energy Mahinda Amaravira. The final report on the 6-month-long study of the contents of the Millennium Challenge Compact Agreement was handed over to President Gotabaya Rajapaksa yesterday. Among many revelations brought to the President's attention by the chairman of the Special Committee, Professor Lalitha Sirigunarwan, was reports of the previous government having signed the MCC agreement in 2 phases in 2017 and 2018, and that although sums of $7.4 million and $2.6 million had been disbursed for the project, no paper trail of these sums existed. In response, the Embassy of the United States in Colombo today tweeted a denial of having made any payments to the Sri Lankan government, saying, quote, "No MCC grant monies were ever transferred to or spent by the government under the current $480 million grant. Funds for the preparatory activities have been cancelled or indefinitely postponed pending the government's decision whether to proceed with the grant," unquote. Meanwhile, US Ambassador Elena B. Teplitz says that the US government is always supportive of Sri Lanka's development activities and is ready to provide technical assistance to Sri Lanka's power and energy sector, including the first LNG power project in the island. She added that the US government is ready to provide its fullest assistance to road traffic problems in urban areas of the country as well. Teplitz's remarks have come when she met with Minister of Power and Energy and Transport Service Management Mahinda Amaravira yesterday at his official residence. Minister Amaravira has said that the government has implemented a program to generate electricity by exceeding the total electricity requirement of Sri Lanka by 2023, and that initial steps have been taken to commence few power and energy development projects, including the first LNG power plant in Sri Lanka. He had added that the Norocchole coal power plant is to be built in an environmentally friendly manner, and the Cabinet has given its approval for this project. The Presidential Commission of Inquiry investigating the Easter Sunday terror attacks was told that 14 months after the deadly terror attacks, victims still remain under medical care, with some unsure of whether they can ever return to their old lives. This was revealed by Director of the Archbishop of Colombo's Satsarana Social Welfare Organisation, Father Don Nishanta Lawrence Ramanayaka, who briefed the Commission on the fate of much of the funds earmarked for victim relief. The Commission was also told of official lethargy in responding to the Cardinal's questions regarding the fate of the massive $5 million donation presented to former President Maithripala Sirisena by a Dubai-based Muslim organisation.
The Presidential Commission of Inquiry probing the Easter Sunday attacks heard evidence from the director of the Archbishop's Satsarana Social Welfare Organisation, Father Don Nishanta Lawrence Ramanayaka, last evening. The commission asked Father Ramanayaka which churches are funded by the Satsarana Institute. In response, Father Ramanayaka stated that funds had been provided to St. Anthony's Church Kochikade, St. Sebastian's Shrine in Katuapitia, and on special instructions of the Cardinal, the Zion Church in Batticaloa too had been earmarked for such assistance in 2 phases. The priest responded that on the instructions of the Archbishop, under Phase 1, he, along with several other priests, had visited the Zion Church and had deposited Rs 5 million into the account of an organisation called Caritas EHED, which was active in relief efforts in the area at the time. He added that in June 2019, the Cardinal had visited the Zion Church and presented a cheque to the tune of Rs 5 million to the head of the church, Pastor Roshan. He also revealed that no receipt was sought from Pastor Roshan at the time, due to the official means in which the cheque was presented to him by the Cardinal. However, Pastor Roshan was instructed to provide an official acknowledgement of the donation, but no communication had been received to date. The Commission was told that Pastor Roshan is currently in Canada, along with his spouse. The Commission then inquired from the priest if the funds in question were in fact distributed to the victims. Father Ramanayaka responded that when he had telephoned Pastor Roshan in Canada, he had been told that all details will be provided to him upon the pastor's return to the country. However, no date of his return had been volunteered. The Commission's attention was then drawn to a testimony given by the priest that mentioned funds that were received from an international organization for the provision of relief to the affected victims during the previous regime. Father Ramanayaka revealed that although ceremony had been held at the Nelumpokula Theatre, where a Dubai-based Muslim organisation had presented former President Maithripala Sirisena with a dummy cheque to the tune of $5 million, No assistance, however, had been provided to the affected through this donation. He added that although the Archbishop had approached several individuals and requested assistance in finding out the fate of the funds, no such investigation had been launched. The commission then asked the priest how many parishioners had been injured at St. Anthony's Church. He replied that 128 people from 121 families had been listed as injured in the attack. Further, the commission was told that a total of 260 people had been injured at the Katuapitiya shrine, with most of the victims already discharged from hospital and returned home. In addition, the priest revealed that 14 months on since the attacks, a further 37 victims are still receiving intensive medical care for serious injuries. Father Ramanayaka added that this number includes many who are unable to return to their normal lives.
We will see you shortly after this break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. You're watching First at 9. Now, Minister of Health and Indigenous Medical Services Pavitra Wanyarachi says that all preschools will be allowed to reopen at 50% capacity while adhering to health and safety guidelines. The country has been taking a measured approach in reopening it following the lockdown brought on by the COVID-19 pandemic. With the number of active cases under 400, Sri Lanka's coronavirus recovery rate is now in the excess of 80%.
With 17 patients recovering from the COVID-19 virus today, the country's overall recoveries rose to 1,619. Though that figure seems considerable, the number of active coronavirus cases in the island is 380. There hasn't been any community transmission of the virus for almost 2 months, and all the COVID-19 cases recorded since the 30th of April have been from foreign arrivals or from within the Navy cluster. Meanwhile, a total of 9 COVID-19 patients were confirmed yesterday. 6 among them are naval personnel undergoing quarantine at the Vidathapalai Quarantine Centre. The remaining 3 are sea marshals who are undergoing quarantine at the Booster Naval Base. In the meantime, a total of 904 naval personnel have been diagnosed with the COVID-19 virus so far, since the first Navy sailor tested positive for COVID-19. That said, 820 of them have since recovered from the virus, with 9 more being given the all-clear to go home today. From Sri Lanka's total of 1,619 confirmed COVID-19 cases, 750 are foreign returnees. Among them are 30 foreign nationals, while the rest of the 720 are Sri Lankan expatriates.
අද වෙනකොට රටවල් 42කින් 10,694ක පිරිසක් මේ ලංකාවට එන්න ඕනේ කියන පිරිස ලංකාවට පැමිණ හමාරයි. ශ්‍රී ලාංකික නාවිකයන්ට තමන්ගේ නෞකාවෙන් බැහැලා එන්න අපි දැන් අවසර දෙනවා. ඒ වගේම තමයි එක ප්‍රධාන සාධකයක් මේ රටේ කොවිඩ් මේ තරමට පාලනය වෙන්න මේ අපි නිරෝධායන මධ්‍යස්ථාන ඇති කරපු එක. එංගලන්තේ මේ නිරෝධායනය පටන් ගන්න යන ජූලි මාසේ පළවෙනිදා. ඒ වගේම තව එකක් කියනවා දැන් මම යුද හමුදාව යොදවන්න යනවා කොවිඩ් පාලනයට. අපි යුද හමුදාව යෙදෙව ජනවාරි මාසේ අග ඉඳන්.
In other developments, 449 Sri Lankans were repatriated from Lebanon, India, New Zealand, Germany and Italy today. The returnees who arrived at the Matala Rajapaksa International Airport and the Bandaranaike International Airport were subjected to PCR tests and were directed to quarantine centres. Meanwhile, all archaeological sites, monuments, premises and museums coming under the Department of National Museums, as well as the Public Reference Division of the Department of National Archives, would open to the general public from the 1st of July under the health and safety guidelines issued by the Ministry of Health. In the meantime, Minister of Health and Indigenous Medical Services Pavitra Wanyarachi says that all preschools in the island will be allowed to reopen at 50% capacity under health and safety guidelines.
සෞඛ්‍යංශ සහ විශේෂඥ උපදෙස් සැලකිල්ලට ගනිමින් දිවයිනේ පෙර පාසල් සියල්ල විවෘත කිරීමට මින්පසු ඉඩකඩ ලැබෙනවා.
කොරෝනා වෛරසය පැතිරීම වළක්වන්න සබන් යොදා දෑත් සෝදන්න.
Moving on with other local stories, another underworld figure was shot dead by the police today during an exchange of gunfire. The deceased is said to be a gangland assassin and a drug racketeer. In a separate development, the Borala police have apprehended 4 suspects who attempted to provide Valikata prison inmates with mobile phones, SIM cards, chargers and various other items.
The Paligoda Police Crime Division had received information indicating that Sanjiva Sampath, alias Katavalapitiga Sampath, was heading towards Colombo on a motorcycle. Accordingly, the police ordered the motorcycle the suspect was travelling on to halt in the area of Miriswata. At that instance, the police said that the suspect had disregarded stop orders. Police officers had given chase in a vehicle and the suspect had opened fire on the police in the area of Puakwata. Police had then returned fire, during which time the suspect had sustained injuries. He was then admitted to the Malvatuhiripitiya base hospital. Police, however, said that the suspect later succumbed in hospital. It is reported that the 25-year-old suspect is a gangland assassin and a drug racketeer. Police said the deceased is a disciple of remanded underworld figure Ganemulla Sanjeeva. He is also suspect in gunning down a woman on the 28th of August in 2018. In the meantime, a rented residence along the Batuvita Road in Gonapala had been searched by police yesterday. During the operation, an underworld figure and his spouse had been arrested while in possession of 1.28 kilograms of heroin. What's more, 3 sharp weapons, cash in the excess of 300,000 rupees and equipment used in packaging narcotics was also taken into custody. In a separate development, another suspect was arrested by the Gampola police while in possession of 108 grams of heroin. The suspect is said to be part of a drug racket operated by a disciple of remanded underworld figure Angoda Lokka.
The Colombo Magistrates Court has issued warrants on the driver and the assistant involved in the controversial white van media briefing, which was called for by Minister Rajitha Sena, or former Minister Rajitha Senaratne, I should say, during the run-up to the presidential election in early November last year. Additional Magistrate Priyantha Liyanage, issuing the warrants, called for the arrest of the duo as they failed to make an appearance before court today. Making submissions, the Criminal Investigation Department said that the 2 defendants were reportedly remanded by the Gampha Magistrates Court over a robbery, and yet they had not taken measures to inform the situation officially. The legal counsel representing the 2 defendants were also absent at the hearing. Senaratne called 2 persons for the media briefing in question, where they made statements regarding alleged white vans and purported incidents of abductions, assassinations, robberies and forced disappearances during the administration of former President and Prime Minister Mahinda Rajapaksa. Them had claimed that he was a white van driver involved in abducting people, while the other claimed he once served as a driver to transport a stock of gold in previously LTTE held areas. The 3rd and 4th suspects of the case are former Minister Senaratne and former Chairman of the State Pharmaceutical Corporation, Rumi Mohammed. We will see you once more after this break. Bear with us. Welcome back. This is First at 9. Now, Chairman of the Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapriya, says that the Commission is confident that election results will be released on the day following the polls. He made these comments when he inspected a mock polling centre exercise in Monaragala today.
A model vote counting centre was tested out today according to health and safety guidelines at the Monaragala Royal College. Chairman of the Election Commission, Mahinda Deshapriya, arrived at the location to inspect the proceedings.
පීතනමුළු ලංකාවෙම අපට ඒ ගණන් කිරීමේ මධ්‍යස්ථානවල ඡන්ද ගණන් කිරීම පස්වරු 3 4 වගේ වෙලාවල එනකොට ඉවර කරගන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. ඒ මොනොත් මුළු ලංකාවෙම ඡන්ද ප්‍රතිඵලය අපට දෙන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා බොහෝ වෙලාවට 6 වෙනිදා පස්වරු 8 විතර වෙනකොට. සමහර වෙලාවට මොකක් හරි බරපතල කඩාවැටීමක් එක ඡන්ද ගණන් කිරීම මධ්‍යස්ථානෙවත් ඒක රෑ 10 විතර වෙන්නත් පුළුවන්. හැබැයි ඒ පක්ෂෙන් හෝ කණ්ඩායමෙන් තේරීපත් වෙන മന്ത്രിවරු කවුද කියන එක කියන්න වෙන්නේ මනාප ගණන් කිරීමට ඊට වඩා වැඩි වෙලාවක් යනවා. නමුත් අපි කොහොම වුණත් අපි ඡන්ද විමසීම අගෝස්තු 5 වෙනිදා පවත්වන නිසා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම අපි 6 වෙනිදා අනිවාර්යයෙන්ම ගණන් කළා රටේ ආණ්ඩු බලය හිමි වෙන්නේ කොයි පක්ෂයටද එහෙම නැත්නම් කොයි ස්වාධීන කණ්ඩායමටද කියන එක කියන්න පුළුවන්.
ඡන්දය ප්‍රකාශිත කිරීමේ කාල සීමාව පැයකින් දීර්ඝ කරනවද නැත්නම් පවතින තත්ත්වයටම පවත්වාගෙන යනවද?
තාම ඒ ගැන තීරණයක් කළා නැහැ. ඒක තීරණයක් කරන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ මේ 30 වෙනිදා තියෙන කමිෂන් සභාව රැස්වීමේදී.
මේ වන විට මනාප අංක ප්‍රදර්ශනය කරන්න දෙන්නේ නැහැ. එතකොට කොහොමද අලුතෙන් මැතිවරණ ඉදිරිපත් කරන අයට මේක අවාසිදායකයි නේද?
ඒක පනතේ තියෙන නීතියක් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරා මිසක් මැතිවරණ කමිෂන් සභාව වෙනම නීතියක් කරලා නැහැ. මෙතෙක් අපි කරලා තිබුණ එක වැරදි වෙන්න පුළුවන්. වැරදි එකක් නිවැරදි කරාම පරණ වැරද්ද ආපහු කරන්න ඕන කියලා එකක් නැහැ.
Now, the central bank today moved to clarify its regulation and supervision of non-bank financial institutions. The monetary body came under some criticism recently with the collapse of the ETI Finance and their finance companies, which left depositors inconvenienced, leaving questions on the central bank's role as a regulator. In today's clarification, the central bank insists that the responsibility of any failures of LFCs ultimately falls on their boards of directors and key management personnel who take independent business decisions. The central bank says that it carries out the regulation and supervision of licensed finance companies to ensure and strengthen the stability of the LFCs and in turn the stability of the financial system, which is one of the core objectives of the central bank. Such stability, it says, is ensured through minimum capital, minimum liquidity and provisioning requirements, regulation of investments to reduce concentration risk and corporate governance requirements. The CBSL notes that the LFCs are managed by boards of directors and key management personnel, which take independent business decisions and take full responsibility of managing the business, adding that such business decisions may lead to failure of such LFCs despite continuous regulation and supervision carried out by the CBSL. The monetary body stresses that cancellation of license of an LFC is the final step of number of supervisory measures and is done only when it is established that continuation of the business of such LFC would be detrimental to interest of its depositors and other creditors. It also insists that an LFC is obliged to take all reasonably necessary measures to repay deposits to its depositors under the Finance Business Act. The statement highlights that the CBSL does not ensure that an LFC under its regulation and supervision does not fail, but would take all possible efforts to prevent such failure. It reiterates that the CBSL does not guarantee the return of deposits of a regulated financial institution and repayment of such deposits from CBSL funds. In 2010, the CBSL established the Sri Lanka Deposit Insurance and Liquidity Support Scheme, which currently pays a maximum of 600,000 rupees per depositor for each financial institution of which license is cancelled or suspended. The depositors of Central Investment and Finance PLC, the Standard Credit Finance Limited, the Finance PLC and TKS Finance Limited, of which licenses were cancelled recently, are being paid out of the scheme, subject to the said maximum of 600,000 rupees per depositor. Therefore, it says that no CBSL or government funds are used for deposit insurance payments to depositors of the said LFCs. Further, upon liquidation of the said LFCs, the depositors may be entitled to further payments through proceeds received from disposal of assets. The CBSL invites the public to be vigilant when depositing their money as to the soundness of the relevant LFC. Meanwhile, touching on the recent incident where a person was assaulted and murdered by employees of an unauthorized financial institution purported to be providing finance leasing facilities, the CBSL says that registration under the Finance Leasing Act No. 56 of 2000 is mandatory to carry out finance leasing business, and any person carrying out finance leasing business without such registration commits an offence under the Finance Leasing Act. What's more, it says that only registered leasing establishments are subject to regulation and supervision of the CBSL, including the debt moratorium, announced through circulars No. 4 and 5 of 2020 issued by the CBSL. The central bank emphasises that the said moratorium does not apply to entities other than licensed banks, licensed finance companies and other specialised leasing establishments registered under the FLA. The messaging service Viber is severing all ties to Facebook as part of a growing boycott of the company by commercial partners. The company initially started, the campaign initially started in the US after Facebook's refusal to take action against posts from Donald Trump, which critics said incited violence, has now grown to become an international movement. Viber, owned by Japanese conglomerate Rakuten, says that the move to cut ties was prompted by Facebook's poor judgment in understanding its role in today's world. On Wednesday, Viber pulled all advertising from Facebook and its sister app, Instagram. Now the company has begun the more labor-intensive process of removing all Facebook technology from Viber's own apps. Viber is the fifth biggest messaging service with more than 1 billion users around the world. Now to bring you a market update, Sri Lanka's stock market crossed the 1 billion rupee mark for the third consecutive week as the S&P/SL climbing 3.29 points to close at 2,290.85, while the ASPI was up by 17 points. Brokers say that the index recovered from a drop in the first half hour of trading today, continuing sideways movement until noon before picking up into an upward trajectory for the rest of the day. Market turnover for the day amounted to 1.27 billion rupees, with 98 stocks making gains and 51 falling. Now here's a brief report on today's market performance.
Today also market ended in the positive territory for the 9th consecutive trading session. We saw the ASPI gained by about 17 points, while the S&P SL20 gained by about 3 points today. So we saw a significant interest in the banking sector counters again today, primarily focused on the local buying interest. So we saw commercial, HNB and Sampath taking priority, while also John Keel's Holdings, NTB, Hemas were some of the other shares that there was significant investor interest today. Foreign participation was rather low today, around 10%, while the local participation was very high, about 90% today. However, we still saw a net foreign outflow of around 160 million rupees, mainly in Nations Trust Bank and Hemas and Commercial Bank. In addition, we saw again the turnover crossing 1 billion mark. The turnover actually has crossed the 1 billion mark for 3 consecutive weeks on the trot. So we are seeing strong turnover levels on a continuous basis now, mainly with the interest of the local investors. With the low interest rate environment that is prevailing, there seems to be a significantly higher level of investor interest in the equity market.
Now in your currency update, the Sri Lankan rupee ended the day at 186 rupees and 10 cents against the US dollar, amounting to a 0.18% appreciation. The rupee closed at 186 rupees and 30 to 45 cents to the US dollar yesterday. Now here's a look at how the Sri Lankan rupee traded against other major currencies during the day. Following recent surges in some states preparing to reopen, U.S. officials are now beginning to believe that as many as 20 million Americans may have had the virus in their systems, but never even knew about it. Meanwhile, new studies have shed light on the effects of the COVID-19 virus on the brain, which could cause complications such as stroke, inflammation, psychosis, and dementia-like symptoms in some severe cases.
With the United States of America accounting for over 2.5 million COVID-19 infections and over 126,800 fatalities, US officials believe as many as 20 million Americans have contracted the coronavirus, suggesting millions had the virus and they never knew it. A recent surge in infections and hospitalizations has prompted the states of Texas, Florida and Arizona to pause reopening plans. In the meantime, India neared 500,000 confirmed coronavirus cases, with its biggest 24-hour spike of 17,296 new infections, prompting a delay in resumption of regular train services of more than a month. The Health Ministry also reported 407 more deaths in the previous day, taking its total fatalities to 15,301. The ministry, however, said that the recovery rate was continuing to improve at 57.43%. Meanwhile, Beijing has partially lifted the weeks-long lockdown imposed in the Chinese capital to head off a feared second wave of coronavirus infections after 3 million samples were taken in 2 weeks. Dozens of residential compounds across the city were shut down, with authorities rolling out mass testing campaigns to root out any remaining cases. In more developments, a preliminary study of patients hospitalized with COVID-19 has found the disease can damage the brain, causing complications such as stroke, inflammation, psychosis and dementia-like symptoms in some severe cases. Researchers say that the findings published in the Lancet Psychiatry Journal yesterday are the first detailed look at a range of neurological complications of COVID-19 and underline a need for larger studies to find the mechanisms behind them and assist the search for treatments.
Pakistani opposition parties have criticized Prime Minister Imran Khan after he told Parliament that Al-Qaeda leader Osama bin Laden had been martyred in 2011 by US forces. Bin Laden, who masterminded the 9/11 attacks on the United States, was killed in a raid on his hideout in the Pakistani city of Abbottabad after eluding detection for nearly 10 years. Pakistan was not aware of the operation, which involved US helicopters flying deep into the country from Afghanistan. Khan said in his speech while recounting the lows of the relationship between Islamabad and Washington that he will never forget how Pakistanis were embarrassed when the Americans came into Abbottabad and killed Osama bin Laden and martyred him. Khan's speech came as the country's Foreign Office hit out at a US State Department report that accused Pakistan of continuing to be a safe haven for regionally focused terrorist groups. And that's it from all of us here at First at 9. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.